Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to speak at the inaugural session of the International Conference on Tourism and Leisure Studies. In fact, I wish I could have joined you in person, which would have been my second trip to the Muziris area. I was indeed fortunate to visit in late 2018 and came back with great appreciation for all the efforts accomplished by many to preserve and promote the history of Muziris. And from an institutional standpoint, of course, UNESCO and the government of Kerala are happy to cooperate together on the Spice Route initiative and highlight the historical and cultural heritage of Muziris. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is the roadmap for human progress accepted by all governments of the world, is a little weak, in my view, when it comes to culture, but it does recognize that culture can contribute to economic growth, the creation of sustainable communities, as well as sustainable consumption. UNESCO, for one, as the leading United Nations agency with a mandate on culture, proposes to better unleash the power of culture and creativity to not only create cohesive communities, but to also link culture to livelihoods, to prove that culture can and does serve as a foundational basis to lasting growth for all, helping to leave no one behind. Culture, in its myriad forms, is a critically important tool for economic growth and development. And to discuss its contributions today is particularly relevant and timely, since in India and worldwide, the cultural sector has been massively affected by the pandemic. The impact of COVID-19 has been felt, as we all know, in all venue-based activities like museums, theaters, cinemas, and other performing locations. But it has also impacted what we at UNESCO call intangible cultural heritage, and which relates to social practices and festivals, as well as traditional craftsmanship. A recent UNESCO publication showed clearly that the destruction left in the wake of the pandemic has had far-reaching consequences for all socio-economic structures, but especially so for the art and culture sectors. The already precarious positions of the practitioners of these industries were further exacerbated by disruptions in the entire creative value chain, leading to unemployment and a drastic loss of revenue, at least 20 to 40% globally in 2020 alone. So the past 2 years have driven, I think, the point home very clearly and with urgency that our world's most pressing problems can only be tackled when we come together as people. I truly think that the 2 years of the pandemic have really changed the way we as individuals think about and interact with the world around us. It has fundamentally altered the ways in which governments and civil society stakeholders design policy that will benefit the largest cross-section of society. In the case of India, for the field of culture, an increasing source of revenue generation in the pre-COVID period was the sector of tourism. And like everywhere else around the world, the declines were dramatic. International estimates ranged from 60 to 80% in terms of decrease of visitor arrivals in 2020 alone. And as tourism returns to India, and as we look forward to the rejuvenation of the hospitality sector, it is now a moment to imagine and create the change we need. What I would like to argue today, as I often do, is that much more investment needs to be placed on the living heritage of India's diverse communities and therefore on its intangible cultural heritage. We need to better link traditions to livelihoods And we at UNESCO have tried to develop this principle in a variety of ways, in very practical ways. Our current flagship program is the Rural Crafts and Cultural Hubs project in West Bengal, which is realized in partnership with the government of West Bengal. And our other flagship project is also in the same field, to promote cultural tourism in Western Rajasthan, this time in partnership with the government of Rajasthan. In the case of West Bengal, our intervention aims to impact 50,000 rural craft practitioners and is oriented towards livelihood generation. The project is targeted at not only strengthening the traditional skills of rural artists, but also their understanding of cultural enterprises and entrepreneurship. It comes also with an attempt to bring visitors, tourists essentially, Indians and foreigners, to the cultural hubs we have created there. In Rajasthan, we have been identifying and promoting experiential, sustainable tourism destinations that will draw from thoughtful itineraries and take visitors through various sites where intangible cultural heritage is practiced authentically. These are all performing arts and craft-based village clusters. These two partnerships have already begun to yield a lot of results that span far beyond the realm of economic growth, and also ensure the well-being of the communities where we have based our projects. I have really no doubt that the same can be done in Kerala, in and around Muziris and beyond, so that not only archaeological and other remains of an illustrious past can be honored and celebrated, but where tourism can be linked to the present and the many facets of intangible cultural heritage that the state has to offer. In addition to the two interventions I just mentioned, I also want to highlight our partnership with the Indian Hotels Company Limited, that is the name of the group of Taj and other hotels, which also shows how the private sector can contribute. Just a couple of months ago, we launched this novel partnership with IHCL, which offers visitors to Taj hotels the unique opportunity to visit sites where living heritage is practiced. This allows the tourists to foster an appreciation for indigenous crafts and cultural practices while providing practitioners the chance to generate an income. I don't want to go on and on, but the message I would like to convey today is fairly simple. The pandemic deprived us of human contact, and now we have to make sure that this aspect is never forgotten. Aside from showcasing the past through monuments, museums, and the like, as we should, we must also find a way to better promote human traditions, many of which are dying or in danger of being forgotten. They must be placed at the center of all cultural tourism initiatives with the full involvement of local communities as equal partners of development. This is the only way forward in the post-COVID world we look to invent. Beyond economic gain, the advantages of livelihood projects based on intangible cultural heritage are manifold and will offer many dividends. Of course, they will serve as a source of decent work for younger generations of women and men who, in turn, will proactively choose to remain rooted in their cultural context. They will then proudly perpetuate cultural traditions and ensure intergenerational transmission. This is what will allow communities to remain intact and guarantee that youth remain in these communities instead of migrating to an uncertain future in the cities. This is clearly a win-win-win propositions. Dear friends, cultural preservation is essential to the formulation of a blueprint for sustainable growth and development. Growth, however, can only be sustained and consolidated when we keep people at the center of our imagination. Yes, let us formulate human-centric developmental policies in tourism too. After close to 2 years of living in the shadow of the pandemic, we are fortunate that we are closer to normalcy today. As the pandemic ebbs and we try to return once again to life as we know it, we must come together to rebuild that which was lost and to do it differently and better. I wish you all the best for the upcoming conference.